Catherine, welcome to my studio, and in today's video I'm going to show you some of my handmade books from various different formats, and then I'm going to talk about these three which I've made just recently and talk about those, and then there'll be another video about how I made those. This isn't book binding, that's a more technical craft that you probably need several years of training to do. This is making simple art books, and I just love making them. They're really fun. You can do all sorts of things with them. I'm going to show you some where I've used old papers and some that I made the paper specially for the book, and other ones where I had some papers and I wanted to show what was on them in a good way. So I then bound them into a book. So I'll start off with this one. This I made a long time ago. I did a little evening class, and it's an accordion book. As you can see, it's all connected, and one thing I particularly like about this, it's a very simple thing, but I made it with card, and I found this tissue paper that had a sort of wood grain on it, and I glued it on really carefully so I didn't get any wrinkles or anything, and it almost has a sort of leather look about it, and I really like it. And this was a book that had a particular theme, and it's called Persistence of Vision, because it was about a sort of a scientist. He was called Edward Muybridge, and he was one of the first people who took moving film, and he wanted to prove, somebody sort of challenged him about whether people didn't know whether horses, when they galloped, whether they took all their hooves off the ground or not. So he set up some sort of camera traps and managed to film lots of stages, and then he went on to do people as well. And I'm just rather fascinated with sort of early photography. So this whole little book is just sort of, and that's a pop-up structure that I did as well. This whole book is just sort of about, it's got things to do with him. It doesn't have a particular narrative. It was just images that I found that I liked, that I put together. And then I think I went and took my own photographs of some ponies to do the same. But it makes a really neat structure, and it's such a lovely way of presenting something. You could use it for lots of different reasons. You could record a holiday like that, or an event. Look, it's a good way of sort of doing a deeper dive than maybe just one work. So that's that one. And then this one is made using, this is a simple sewn structure, and it has signatures, and the signature is just where you fold the pages into each other. So all books are made like this. So if I show it from the top, you can see those were 4 sheets, and they've been folded over and nested inside each other, and that makes one signature. And this has got 4 signatures in. And then it was bound together with, it could be one called Coptic binding. You just have to put the thread through, and then you just make a sort of chain link onto the next one. And one thing I like about all these books is that they lay flat. If it's something that you're going to be working in, that's quite a good thing to remember, because there's some, I think they call them stab stitch bindings, where you can bind separate pieces, which is fine if you've already worked on them, but then the book won't lay flat if you want to do anything more. And with this one, I decorated the pages first with sort of random stamps and prints and colours. And then at the time I was doing work on butterflies and moths, and so there's some that are sort of like more, there's just a bit of collage of a moth there, but I was also really interested in the sort of very close up. So some of these are quite abstract looking, and I made a screen that sort of looked like the scales. And some of these pages are finished, some of them are just sort of designs, ideas and things. I could go back to that and work in it. So it just depends, it's a good place for, I think it's a work of art in its own right, but also it's a good place for sort of working on ideas that you might use for something else. and you can even actually use the pages themselves. I'll talk about that later. So that was a simple stitch one. Then these are a couple, I'll link the video because I made these earlier these years. So these are very simple. They're just using square envelopes that have been stuck together and then decorated in certain ways and printed on. But that's such a simple, cheap way of making a book. You just need to get hold of some square envelopes. And I did that colourway, and I also did a sort of cooler, more sort of wintry colourway as well. So those are both little accordion books. This is a variation on an accordion book because you can see that it has an accordion, that part, but it's called accordion flag book, because then you can attach prints or drawings or paintings onto each fold. And that's a really nice way of using prints that you might already have. And I'll link to the video where you can see a tutorial for that in more detail. But that's a nice way of using prints you've already got. This was one I did a while ago, and I just did some watercolour portraits of various wildflowers local to me. And this is quite thick watercolour paper, but I managed to stick them together to make this accordion by using tape. I just used masking tape just to attach one to the other, and it took a bit of pressing because, as I say, the paper is very thick. And then I made these boards. I think they were just you know, the boards you get at the back of pads. I often keep those, and then it's been covered with some paper, some printed paper, and they make really nice book boards. So that's quite a sort of substantial, big scale book. And then these two were made using these individual ring binders. This one was, and I'll link that video as well, where I'd made a travel journal, and I took pages that already had some patterns on and some painting on, and then I did some printing while I was actually on holiday, I think for about the first time ever, and then put more things, added photographs and things at the end. And one thing I like about this is that you can open these up and then you can change pages. So you're not, it's not like it's all done. You can still play around with it. And this is very similar. I mean, I'm not going to show the inside because it's got people's emails. It was just my little visitors book for when I had my exhibition. So again, I used these boards and I used some of my prints on them, both on the outside and the inside, and used just 3 of these ring binders. So that made a nice little extra. Yeah, this one you might, if you've been following me, if you've seen some of my other videos, you might have seen this one before. And it's a little bit different because this was actually a bought sketchbook. So this one, I've just done so much with it. You know, I've added pages, I've sewn some in, I've stuck some in, I've added transparencies. I've done so much with it that I think it kind of counts as my own creation, because that one, you know, I've added, that one sort of opens right out. So again, I'll link that video where I talk in more detail about it. And I did actually take photographs of these and have them printed on fabric and made a quilt out of that. So you never know where one of these books might lead. As I say, it's a sort of work of art in its own right, but it also might lead to other ideas and other work. And then you remember the little one that I showed you, done with this sort of sewn binding. I did a big one of these quite recently, and I haven't done that much in it, so you can see it's exactly the same, but just on a sort of A4 scale. And what I did with the pages for this was I had some big sheets, and again I did lots of sort of mark making, dribbled some ink, stamped a few things. These are just, I think that was just a credit card dipped in ink to make stripes with it. And it's just really nice to have, instead of having a blank page, you've got something to work from. And recently I was doing a lot of jelly printing with summer flowers, and I've just started trying out to see what they look like against these shapes, and I rather like it. So that's one that I did there. So I think I'm going to fill this up with more like that. But I might not do it all in one go. I might do a few and then come back to it. But I like the sort of chunkiness of this. And the other advantage of making your own book is that you can choose what paper you want to use. So this is a mixture of cartridge paper and watercolour paper of various different weights. And having that variety adds interest as well. And then, so those are the main ones I wanted to show you, but I've also got some little ones. These are very simple. So I made this just to be a holder for I've got lots of nice artist card with my details on, and this is just a long piece of paper folded up, creased and folded up at the bottom, and I didn't even stick the end, but it's enough to, you know, I could carry that around if I wanted to, but that's there's a whole sort of miniature books. I could really get into making miniature books, I think. They're very sweet, and you can just use, you know, this was an offcut, I think, of something else I'd printed. So it's a way of using up. And then, let me find the place where that goes. And then you can also make books out of single sheets of paper. Let me know if you'd like me to show you that. And because I've got a lot of these old maps, that's what I did. So you just have to fold it and then sort of cut it in certain ways, and I printed on, so I've got the map on one side and I've got the print on the other side, and I just think it's quite a sort of interesting, makes quite an interesting structure. And then I did a variation on that. So again, I had one of a more modern maps that one was just kind of black and white. This one had a lot of the red and green and blue. So on the other side I did lots of printing showing using stamps that I thought the shapes kind of echoed some of the sort of topographical things that you get on a map. And that's got lots of, it doesn't have to be as big as that, you can have fewer folds, and you could sort of like, because one page leads to another with these ones and then it sort of folds around, you could sort of like tell a story or a pictorial story. So again, you know, there's so many different things you could do with that. And then these last three are ones that I've been making recently, and there'll be a video up soon where I go into detail how I make them. So they're variations of what we've seen already. And one is a sewn, very simple pamphlet stitch with a cover, and I have actually sewn through the cover. This one is made using a ring binding machine. Now I have my own, but you can get those done at places. I'll show you how I did that. And I've collected all sorts of interesting papers. So some of them are from old books. Let me just show you. So I'll just show you the third book. This one is using an old book cover. So the book was kind of falling apart. I often buy old second-hand bookshops. I go to Hay-on-Wye quite regularly, and it's known as the town of books. And one of their bookshops that I've been going to for a long time, since I was a child, is an old converted cinema. And in the front, outside, they have these sort of book booths, and they have all the books there that are kind of slightly past it, so they're really cheap. So I usually go there, and I'm always looking for things with insects and plants and that sort of thing, natural things. This one was all about clouds, but it was kind of falling apart. So I've taken the pages out, and I have reused some of them because you get such, you've got the nice typefaces with this old paper. It's usually quite sort of thick, good quality. But then I used the book as the binding, and this was a combination of the stitch I used in that, and then I just glued down the front and the back page to make it quite substantial. and I'm just working on another one now. I just had to change the battery in my camera, so sorry if that's a slightly different position. It never gives me much warning. Anyway, I was talking about this one, which is, as you can see, this is just, I've taken they did fall out literally in this one. As another nice little insect book, and so in the next video I'm going to show how I make all 3 of these structures. They're quite simple, but I always find it's easier if somebody shows you how to do it and talks about it, so I will show that. And in the meantime, if you want to join in, just start collecting papers. So in this one, you can see, this one I've done quite a colourful one deliberately. I've used some painted papers, some remains of prints that didn't work out particularly well, or maybe the colour was a bit too bright to be used for anything else. And as I say, I've used the old paper, and that was, if you've got any that are a little bit, so that was like using a 2-page spread, and I just used a bit of tissue paper to reinforce that bit because it was a bit weak. And I've put in some plain paper of various different weights. I came across some music in an Oxfam shop, and I've cut it up. Funny enough, it's kind of violin music, and many years ago I did used to play the violin, but some people might think it's not the done thing to cut up a piece of paper like this, but I think there's so many of these around, they're quite likely to get pulped if they didn't get used, so I feel okay about doing that. And I like to use pages of different weights, so that's quite a sort of lovely translucent handmade paper. Some watercolour paper, some plain paper, more maps because I have so many of these, and that's, that was a bit of a wallpaper sample. Some more painted paper, so these are the other sides. This is what I call sort of roll-off paper when I'm doing my printing. I just sort of roll off to one side and you often get a really nice mixture of colours. That was some drawing of some orchids. I did a lot of those, and I just quite like the marks that makes. It's interesting when you have a page and then you sort of make it into a smaller piece, you sort of see it in a different way. And that was a jelly print that I did recently, and some rather garish pieces that I didn't have a use for at the time. And I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this one yet. I think I want to keep it quite colourful. This one, I deliberately kept it quite restrained and just use kind of black and beige and white and any sort of natural kind of colour. I thought that went with it. That was a print that had a few blotches on, so I didn't really like it that much. Again, the old pages. I think that was some handmade printed paper and some more translucenty calligraphy paper. And then I used the map in the middle because I had a nice big bit, and that's the middle. I've used it to fold out like this, and this is the only page I've done any work in. And I don't know where this is going. I just quite like making the marks, and I might add something to that page, I might not, but as I say, I'm going to keep this one quite restrained. And then this one is just kind of a mixture. I wasn't thinking of a particular colour palette. I added some graph paper as well, and I folded some of them over so it gives you more interest. So in my next video I will show in detail how I've made these, and then there will be a further one where I show you what I'm actually going to end up doing with them. So I hope you enjoyed seeing all those, and do ask me any questions in the comments. And thank you, and join me again soon.